in the other House. We're going to start with file item number 8, out of order, AB 437. Speaker Atkins, and your other measures, Madam Speaker, file item number 6 is on consent. File item number 8, AB 437, Speaker Atkins.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's good to see you. I appreciate your time. I am here to present AB 437, but first I would like to take the committee's amendments listed in the analysis, which would change the certifying entity from GoBiz to the Franchise Tax Board and require the State Controller's Office to send a copy of its annual report on the program activities related to this bill to the committee. Creating a grant program as part of the California Research Tax Credit helps small businesses to monetize some of the research and development tax credits that they receive and reinvest those resources. Research and development tax credits were created in California back in 1987 to put more dollars in the wallets of innovative businesses, money businesses use to create new jobs and expand product lines. However, the data from the Franchise Tax Board shows that often small and medium-sized businesses or companies are able to earn the R&D tax credits, but not really able to receive the monetary benefit because the businesses don't have enough taxable liabilities. AB 437 is not a reimbursable credit. It's a grant program which uses R&D tax credit to determine how much investment the state should provide the small business. And specifically, the bill authorizes eligible businesses to receive a grant for 15% of the credits generated starting in 2016. The bill also would allow a 2-year look-back period for which small businesses can receive a grant for 10% of all tax credits received in 2014 and 2015. Additionally, AB 437 has various accountability reporting measures, including certifying that the taxpayer meets the small business qualifications that are established under the legislation, and prohibiting small businesses that are owned by a larger company from eligibility. The point is to help small and medium-sized businesses. It also requires the Controller's Office to report on program activities. It caps the program at $50 million annually, and it sunsets after 5 years. Mr. Chairman, I have a number of people here to speak on behalf of AB 437. Ken DeVore, who is with the National Federation of Independent Businesses. I think Jimmy, right here, Jimmy Jackson from Comm, which is in my district, and Mike Carpenter representing the California Healthcare Institute.
Thank you so much. Please.
Good morning, Chair and members. Ken DeVore, the National Federation of Independent Business, the largest small business association in the country. There was a time when California was the leading place for defense and aerospace industry and a lot of other industries, and we've seen the decline over the years and as they move out of state. And we believe that this bill sends a strong message to the country that California is a place to do business for small businesses. It's very difficult. It costs small businesses about 3 times as much to comply with taxes as large businesses, about 38% more to comply with regulations. And any help we can give these businesses, these entrepreneurs that have a vision and want to start their business here, I think that the costs are negligible to because if even a portion of these businesses succeed and start generating a profitable product, the state is going to see more revenues generated to far surpass anything that we might lose on this. So we really strongly support this bill and ask for you to vote for it.
Thanks so much.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members. Mike Carpenter. I'm actually here on behalf of the California Life Sciences Association, which is a newly created organization of CHI, so I was with CHI, I guess, a few months ago, and Bay Bio. And we're here in strong support of the bill. We represent the state's life sciences industry, from our great academic research institutes and universities to small R&D companies with just a handful of employees to major manufacturers of therapies and treatments. Our state's life sciences industry is a global leader in public health. Simply put, our products save and improve human lives. The 6 therapeutic areas that our industry is researching most heavily in California include cancer, infectious diseases such as HIV, central nervous system disorders, hormonal disorders such as diabetes, and cardiovascular health. This sector also serves an increasingly important role in the state's economy. We employ more than 270,000 Californians. That's twice as many folks as the state's motion picture industry in jobs that pay well over $100,000 in average wages. And in 2013, our industry contributed nearly $4 billion in direct taxes to state and local governments. As Madam Speaker just said, this is a very modest approach, only applies to small companies. It's capped at $50 million a year. It sunsets in 5 years. And it simply allows small businesses to cash out a portion of the tax credits that they would have earned and allow them to reinvest in the R&D that does some of the things I was just describing. This bill's proposed grant program is needed because smaller companies, which are often the true incubators of our greatest biomedical breakthroughs, have trouble benefiting from the state's R&D tax credit. According to the Franchise Tax Board in 2012, companies with gross annual receipts between $1 and $10 million a year were only able to harvest about 3% of the R&D credits that they earned. So we therefore believe that Madam Speaker's efforts to incentivize R&D investment, which this bill does, makes both sound public health and economic sense. It makes good public health sense because our state's R&D efforts lead to the medical advances that save and improve human lives, and it makes good economic sense because the small companies that do this R&D have to do this R&D in California, and because this creates just the kind of socially productive, clean, well-paying jobs that the state wants to attract and retain. So we would...
Carpenter, though, there's some extraordinary companies in your field in California, Edwards and Allergan and a whole host of them, but they're all big companies that wouldn't otherwise qualify for this tax credit. The nature of that business is huge investment and research costing millions and millions of dollars, not really getting to the essence of monetizing tax credits when you need every nickel for a small company. How many of these companies that are in your industry are small companies that would qualify for this monetized tax credit?
Well, I can't speak to, well, since we just merged with Bay Bio, which actually does have a lot of these smaller companies, I can't speak to that, but I can tell you.
There's an exemption the Speaker just indicated for big companies that have small subsidiaries. That's okay. I just think it's important, and your industry is hugely important. I'm just not so sure it's relevant to the bill at hand. But go ahead. Next, it's fine.
Yes, my name is Jimmy Jackson. I'm the Senior Vice President of Public Policy for Biocom. And we are a life science association in Southern California. We are a regional association started in San Diego in the Speaker's District, and we represent medical device, diagnostic, biotechnology, biofuels companies, universities, and basic research institutions, as well as service providers. And to your question, Mr. Chair, our membership is overwhelmingly small companies. We do have some of the larger companies, but our membership, the vast majority of our members are 100 employees or less. Those companies have a very long ramp up to FDA approval. All of their products have to be FDA approved. That can take anywhere for a medical device company. They may make that in a couple of years. For a biotech company, it may take 7 to 10 years. And those are years where those companies, before they get their approved product, they have no revenue stream other than the investments that people are making in the company. So this bill, and yet they continue to accrue or to expend money that that accrues the R&D credits. So this bill would allow them to get a grant to give up some of those accrued credits in return for a grant from the state, which in a lot of these small companies could mean the difference between being able to hire another researcher or contract out for a bit more of a clinical trial and really make a difference in the company's very survival. You mentioned the fact that it does exclude companies that are owned by a subsidiary of a larger company. I know the profile of most of my member companies are that they are not subsidiaries of larger companies. They are companies that have been founded by researchers.
People the speaker is looking to protect, to gain an advantage by virtue of her measure.
Yes, and the kind of people that she has seen firsthand for many years, going back to her time as a staffer on the City Council. She has been in our facility. She has seen the kind of work that they do. And so and this is a problem that I've been at Biocom for 10 years now. This has been a problem that we've been discussing for all 10 of those years, is how these small companies can get some assistance from the state before they actually have taxable revenue. And this is an incredibly innovative solution that the speaker has come up with, and one that really puts California, I think, on the offensive for attracting life science companies. And I can't overemphasize that enough. This will be a major tool, I think, in attracting companies to San Diego, to Orange County, and to the Bay Area.
EITC for small companies, basically, if you really think about it for a moment. Okay, others in support.
Mr. Chair, members, Jeremy Mers on behalf of the California Chamber of Commerce, also in support.
Thanks, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Chris Rosa on behalf of Flex Tech, as well as SEMI, which is the trade association for the semiconductor industry, in support.
Thank you so much. Others in support. Opposition. Ms. Goldberg.
Mr. Chair, members, Lenny Goldberg, California Tax Reform Association. The historic role of this committee has been to make sure that ill-conceived tax policy does not get out of the Senate or out of this committee. And with all due respects to Madam Speaker, this bill is very highly ill-conceived as tax policy. Refundable tax credits. You may have been Speaker when there was a run on refundable tax credits. Senator Burton had a bill that was amended in the Assembly under your speakership, and we made sure that none of the business tax credits were going to be refundable. So the question is, this is explained as being a grant program. I don't think the state of California has a grant program that has no criteria for success or failure, no job requirement required, no review, no accountability. One of the worst programs we had was the Enterprise Zone program, and that had substantial regulatory process that had an awful lot of people looking at how it was done, and it was still manipulated. And one of the reasons for that is that, as we know, in tax law, the opportunities for manipulation, I will accept that everyone here is very sincere and have real businesses going on, but when you're handing out dollars without any criteria or application process, you are going to find many people manipulating that. I may be an app developer. I've raised some venture capital. I have a lot of R&D credits stored up. I have a product that's going nowhere. And yet, if I get in the first come, first served queue, I can get millions of dollars from the state of California and walk away without anything. Now, when I listen to the testimony and have talked with the Speaker's office and a little with the Speaker, if we need venture capital fund for small businesses, then let's look at what a venture capital fund does. No venture capitalist walks around handing out money without interviewing, seeing what's the product, what's the market, what are the potential, what's the possibilities for this product. Secondly, they also don't hand it out without taking a position of equity, that is to say, I'm going to give you money because you got a good product, even though you're taking a loss. Let us take an equity position. Now, often the state turns that equity position into a discussion of, well, are we creating jobs? Is there economic activity taking place that brings revenue back in? In this case, we have no evaluation criteria. All we have is a check. And on refundable tax credits, not only was this on the business side, we eliminated the refundable tax credit for the renter's credit because the FTB said there was a substantial amount of fraud. If you're holding out the opportunity for $60, and then that's all it was, or $120, people were apparently fraudulently filing. EITC is the one that we have. It's connected to the federal, which is very well established in terms of being able to send a check. You file your taxes. This, no criteria, no application process, no benefits required for the state. So if it's a grant program, well, let's treat it as every thousands and thousands of grant programs where we absolutely review what's going to be done with the money. Or if it's a refundable tax credit, then it's just a straight-up giveaway. So we
offer a point of view, Mr. Goldberg, in that regard, because your analysis seems correct on the surface, in my judgment. But as somebody who's been an entrepreneur, who's tried to apply for grant programs, here's what my anecdotal experience has been. Because it sounds, we in government are always trying to do the right thing to protect people's tax dollars in the most appropriate way. But let me tell you what happens in the real world for somebody who's lived it in the last 12 years since I left government before. You're sweating your guts out when you're a small business. You don't take any money out of the business. You put every dollar back into R&D. This measure is only about R&D. You're trying to perfect your product. You're living the dream. You think you're going to hit the jackpot, and everything that you do is focused on making that product, that innovation, that creativity the best you can. You're not sleeping. You're not getting paid overtime. You're doing nothing but working your guts out. And so if you have to spend what happens in these grant programs, in my experience, has been that you spend all your time filling out paperwork, and you can't afford it. You just can't afford it. You can't afford the time. So this is a 15% number against R&D. It means you're putting every nickel. Cash is king when you're in this situation. Even when you go to a venture capitalist, they make you jump through so many hoops, it becomes so ridiculous, it takes the heart out of what you're trying to do. And there's this entrepreneurial energy that you want to accelerate, that you want to celebrate. These aren't people that are going to take this money and go to Las Vegas and gamble. These are going to people that are going to stretch every nickel that they're going to get. And so you're right. You're right. This is a different program, and she's calling it a grant program. I get that. But who's your audience, and what are they trying to do? That's what I challenge you on.
All right, I will respond to that. You were a wonderful entrepreneur, and I'm sure they're well represented here. However, as we know in tax policy, there are no criteria here. If I've raised enough venture capital, and that's a difficult process as well, I've raised enough venture capital to generate a whole lot of R&D credits, and I'm creating no jobs. My product is a failure. That may be somebody got to market faster than me and I was perfectly legitimate. Otherwise, I had a stupid idea, but I got people to finance it, or my app doesn't work the way it's supposed to. But I've got a lot of R&D credits. What does the state get from giving me, in my failed business that has no revenue and not necessarily any jobs, $5 million without, or $2 million, or however many $1 million in this, without any examination whatsoever? So you can.
I'm not talking about those kinds of numbers. If you look at the.
But let me ask you what the failure rate, how much money you expect, or the speaker expects to be wasted in this program.
A lot of failure, high failure.
Is it 80% of the money will be help continue businesses, and 20% will just be a giveaway? What's the criteria? How do we know? There's not, I've never seen a tax bill like this that doesn't have evaluation criteria, that doesn't have some notion of, okay, you're saying it's great, let's just give it all away as a refund, because it really is a refundable tax credit.
What I'm trying to do here is to put a practical element to this, of what the real human condition's like when you're trying to do this stuff. And nobody's throwing money to the wind. You're parsing every dollar you can parse when you're in these situations, and you're sweating your guts out. That's the reality. And so do we engage in some theoretical discussion about this? She does have a 5-year sunset. Does it work or doesn't it? The fact of the matter is they are California companies where the dollars are being invested in California. I'm sure if you brought in the Department of Finance, even if they're failed entities, they still have significant economic feedback effects because they're hiring Californians. But I want to call on Mr. Carpenter, but I quickly want to establish a quorum here, please. Secretary, call the roll.
Hertzberg?
Here.
Hertzberg present. Nguyen? Bell? Here. Bell present. Hernandez? Lara? Morlock? Morlock present. Havley? Havley present.
Okay, we have a quorum.
I just wanted to say I kind of reject the premise that any of this money would be wasted. It's being used to conduct R&D, which is inherently risky. Not everything pans out, but the stuff that does are the things that we were talking about that end up saving and improving human lives. So I see the cost as being failing to enact legislation that would spur additional research and development. That's the failing. The incentives for the folks that receive these grants, which are tax credits they otherwise could have been able to harvest, the folks have an incentive to see that their research culminates in something that helps the public health. And so I would argue the money's not wasted.
Senator Bell.
Well, there's a lot of R&D tax credits. I think my neck of the woods is particularly benefited by that. What I want to say is I think the R&D tax credit issue, I think we ought to dust it off and maybe look at it as a whole through this committee and see what kinds of tax credits or parts of the R&D tax credits are more productive. I would say this on this bill. The tendency is for small business to get an R&D tax credit where they haven't had a significant portion of the existing R&D tax credit is a logical one. I mean, we should maybe look at the disbursement between the types of businesses we have in California and the types of businesses that create jobs, and then look at where the R&D tax credits are going in terms of the creation of those jobs. Because after all, the R&D tax credit is not just about raising taxes, it's about creating economic activity that benefits the people of California. And the second thing I want to say is that I think R&D tax credits that I've always believed that R&D tax credits somehow there is a relationship between our academic institutions and research and development. And I think we have to explore, when we talk about R&D tax credits, how we can strengthen that relationship and have our R&D tax credits benefit our academic institutions that supply so much of the research and development that drive the economy and create the economy in California. So those are my comments. I feel that the R&D tax credit system in California is not perfect, but it's very clear that small businesses deserve a bigger bite at the apple, and this bill does that, so I support it.
Senator Morlock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The R&D tax credit's been around for decades, so Madam Speaker, honored to have you here. I just had a couple of quick questions that kind of fall in line with what's been said. One, I'm sort of having difficulty with all the credits that we're giving with the status of our budget and our balance sheet. But have we, with Senator Bell's approach, have we taken a hard look at the R&D credit, and have we analyzed audits, or are we using IRS audit statistics, or are we really, have we really been able to measure the effectiveness of this credit?
Well, overall, I think this is a great, robust discussion in terms of what we need to do from a comprehensive overview. I took one piece of it based on what I was hearing throughout the state as I met with California Health Institute, business councils in the Bay Area, San Jose, San Diego, and saw one piece of it that was lacking. Certainly, I think there's room to do an overall review, and that's what these committees are for. I mean, part of our charge, I think, and the Senate, of course, with the longevity, has taken a hard look at oversight, and certainly it's a function we should do. And we need to take a look at how California Competes is working, a program that we just put into place in the last several years. That 25% of that goes towards small businesses. So we have a responsibility and a role to do that, and I think we can do that. The bill today really is trying to make sure that small and medium-sized businesses have the ability to compete as we are looking at tax credits for other industries. Last several years, we've looked at large corporations, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, in terms of the possibility of tax credits to create jobs. This is another component of that because small businesses are the backbone and create most of the jobs in this country. So an overall look we can do. Have we done it comprehensively? No, I don't think we have in a period of years. And given where we're trying to go with spurring the economy and creating, as Senator Bell said, economic activity, it may be time to do that. This includes certainly an oversight role by this committee in particular and the committee process both in the Assembly and Senate, as well as, controller oversight. I think we need to look at that. We want to measure success, and I think we're going to have to do that with California Competes, too, given that we have put out a lot of credits in the last year and a half to help small business.
Thank you. The other question I had, Mr. Chair, is that one of the little pet peeves I had when I was a county supervisor is that we had to fill out grants and then hope that our county wins some of the funds. And so all of a sudden I see a whole row of grant writers, and then I see a whole row on the other side of grant readers, and I just see all this staffing, and I wonder why no better, no worse. If you're going to give the money away, why don't you just give it proportionally to every county and just get it over with and eliminate two whole layers of employees? So I'm having trouble with the grant program aspect. How many employees is it going to take to run the program? We're adding more staff, right?
It's part of, I think, already in the franchise tax board and staffing. I mean, if you look at California Competes, as I see that as sort of a model, that grant program has been pretty much simplified in terms of, if you talk to the small businesses who've applied through California Competes, GoBiz and the process has been able to really make it a much more simple process to take out some of the bureaucracy. And many of those small businesses, I've been meeting with them and holding forums in districts to make them aware of California Competes. They're talking about how it didn't take grant writers and that whole bureaucracy around it. The process is much more simple, and I think that's what we're trying to do. Regionally, I know there's always discussions about regional share, and this is a $50 million program, and certainly we have areas within the state where this seems to be how the industry, particularly life sciences, Mr. Bell talked about the relationship between higher education, academics, and innovation and technology. So there do tend to be areas within the state, but I think this gives them the opportunity to look at it as a resource for expansion into any part of our state, because it's R&D. It isn't just life sciences and medical. It's other areas that deal with manufacturing as well. And that's all throughout the state. I would hate to think that we would do it in a regional way or do a formula and have pots of money sitting there not used when there are companies that need it. But I'm willing to evaluate, as long as we don't create more bureaucracy and keep resources from being spent where they need to be spent with companies that are ready and need the access.
And I was thinking maybe you take the $50 million you allocated according to the credits that are unused to every corporation that's already done it. So you just give it a blanket approach as opposed to all this time and years of trying to analyze grants, et cetera. That was my thought.
And there's probably a simple way to do that in terms of the applications and review of area and the business location.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Pavley.
I'll certainly be supporting this today, and just a note on how important small businesses are when we look at investing actually small sums of money. There's several incubator kinds of offices, if you will, in my Senate district, and I've toured them. And they mostly fall into the clean tech world, but also a lot of the life sciences and biotech people that maybe used to work for Amgen and want to, on their own, go about. And they need this investment because I understand R&D money, it's risky. You invest, a lot of them become those bright ideas, if scaled up, that can really meet the needs for the future, whether it's in the medical sciences or in clean energy. And so with the proper oversight, whether it's this committee, right now, Office of Planning and Research, and GoBiz is doing a very good job, but we need to make sure that, I'm sort of with Senator Morlock on this, that there must be an easier way through all the grant applications and back and forth and who gets picked and how. We need to have simplification and some oversight. But we recognize that not everyone's going to be a success, but they do need that startup money to get to that next level. And then it's really hard after that to scale up and get the investors to really bring it to fruition. But there's an amazing amount of work being done in very small scales all over this state. And they've been sort of frustrated in that they can't compete with the big guys. So if you need a motion, I'd be glad to make it.
Thank you. Motion by Senator Pavley. Any further opposition? I'll get you, Mr. Goldberg. Any further opposition to the thing? Mr. Goldberg,
none of the things that have been discussed are in this bill. There are no criteria. There is nothing that, as the supporter said, that says this has to be used on continued research and development. There is nothing that says there shall be jobs created. As GoBiz has a process in which they evaluate the value of this to the economy, and they don't just hand it out with no criteria. There's nothing in this that even says the business needs to continue. So I have a failing business, a failing app, which gets research and development credits. I apply to get my credits cashed out. I get my money and I walk away. This is the least. I have never seen a tax bill other than a refundable tax credit where it's a matter of entitlement that, and which we got rid of, that has zero criteria for success or failure in it. And I guarantee there'll be plenty of businesses that use this well. And I guarantee from looking at tax law and its implementation for way too many years than you want to know, that there will be a huge amount of money that will be scammed in this. And because it's a giveaway with zero criteria. If you put it in the GoBiz program, that GoBiz program has been funded by getting rid of enterprise zone and other taxes. We had a GoBiz program has some criteria. I appreciate hearing that it's working much more smoothly. It's my understanding as well. There's no reason why these small businesses that are doing R&D, that are legitimate, that are creating jobs, that are going to do more R&D, can't apply to GoBiz. This is just an entitlement giveaway with zero, not even any evaluation at the end. To think that the Rev and Tax Committees are going to oversee it, you have a lot more work to do when there's no criteria, there's no evaluation. It'll just be, much of this money will be a straight-up giveaway, and I wonder whether it's an unconstitutional gift of public funds, but that's not my call.
Madam Speaker.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to say I couldn't disagree more that there are no criteria or guidelines. The Franchise Tax Board is an entity that does work and already addresses and oversees the R&D credit program. We are talking about a small program specifically to try to increase economic activity and entrepreneurship. There is a true-up, there is FTB audit possibilities, there's a review of credits allocated and earned prior to a determination. So, I mean, I'm happy to talk about what we may be lacking, what we may need to do as a state to spur economic activity. I think we need to be creative, we need to be innovative, but we got to have transparency, we have to have oversight and review. But to say that this particular piece of legislation has absolutely no criteria and that we're just going to be handing out money is really a stretch and an unfair kind of assessment of something that we're trying to do to respond to businesses that have really been trying to make an investment in California and which we are trying to keep here. We don't want the small people from Allergan and Qualcomm and all of those who are coming up with their own ideas not to be able to do that here. We want to compete for those businesses to be in our regions connected to our higher education institutions to actually help California, become again, the 7th and 6th largest economies in the world, and to support small jobs. I feel passionate about this. If we need in some way to do a better job, that's our job to do. It's our job to fix, to review, to respond to counties, and to cities who say your program is too cumbersome. You're making it too hard for us to access this. But we have to balance those things with oversight and review. And I think this is a good start. If there are recommendations to make it stronger, please, you're an expert in this area. I'm happy to take recommendations. I'm happy to look at other programs that have California investing, because that is, in essence, what we're trying to do here, to find a way for California to invest. And like Mr. Goldberg's proposal on venture capital, I think it's good to take a look at programs like that and use experts who have a way to weigh in. But I think this is a pretty simple way with $50 million is a lot of money, but in a state the size of California, it's an investment that gives us the ability to see, is this a program, a tool that can work and can help companies? You know, when Qualcomm started, it was a small company, and thank goodness they were good at what they did and were able to expand a relationship with UCSD. We want more Qualcomms, but it's a long road there, and I think the least we can do is find some innovative tools in order to help. Yes, we revamped enterprise zones, and I think we've done a good job, but we are going to have to look back and review that too and see how well that program has done. So I would ask you to help keep this moving forward. Give us the opportunity to help small businesses succeed in California.
I take that as your close, Madam Speaker?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And let me just add one thought on that, because I do think that, you know, I've heard these arguments so much that Mr. Goldberg makes, and they always sound good, and there always will be somebody who slips through the cracks. But in the balance of trying to have a state that, as we've talked about, as Senator Padley talked about, 73% of all businesses are 10 employees or less, it really is the cornerstone of California. And to simplify, to understand as the customer, what's it like to do business with the state? And when you make so many requirements and you make things so difficult, we can argue the theory, but what we end up doing is just allowing those folks who have the experts to write the grants, to do all the stuff that they're going to do, to actually get access to these things. And I actually think it's pretty inventive to monetize tax credits to be able to do this. And just a couple other thoughts with respect to the venture capitalists. When you in fact have this, the leverageability with venture dollars is great, because if your venture capitalists see your ability to monetize some of these dollars, when I had a place in Wales, I had 17.5% back on my VAT tax every month, which went into my finances and worked extremely well in terms of other people financing the company. So it's things that kind of how the finance community works. So, and the final point that what you're hearing here, Madam Speaker, is this discussion. You know, this committee is both, as it relates to your House, the Local Government Committee and the Rev and Tax Committee combined, and we have had a lot of measures in some form or another dealing with tax credits and deductions and things like that. And so we're going to sit back and try to develop a broader strategy of how we think we should be dealing with that, where our priorities are, because it's just spending money on the other side of the balance sheet. So you're kind of getting a piece of that larger conversation that's dominated so much of our committee hearings. So with that, we have a motion. Secretary, call the roll.
Hertzberg?
Aye.
Hertzberg, aye. Wynn? Bell? Aye. Bell, aye. Hernandez? Laura? Morlock? Pavley? Pavley, aye. 3-0.
3-0. Hold that open. Thank you much, Madam Speaker. Your other matters on consent. Next is file item number 1, AB 3, Assembly Member Williams, Isla Vista Community Service.